We have evidence use. John Jung uses broadly three kinds of evidence. He uses quotes. Here I've inserted an excerpt where he uses Gerald Dworkin to establish a foundational understanding of legal paternalism, which kind of sets a foundation for where John Jung can then take the discussion of his essay. He also applies theoretical frameworks. Again, here he uses John Stuart Mill's harm principle, which then allows him to have something to examine paternalistic laws against. That's a very good way of using theoretical frameworks, to use it as a benchmark. He also evaluates evidence to show critical thinking and ability to think beyond what others have written. That's something I briefly touched on before, but as an example here, he talks about Mike Bloomberg's sugar tax. A weak point of the essay, and something I want to point out, is that just because an essay wins doesn't mean it's perfect, is that it doesn't do a lot of reference to data. It does reference studies, but I think a pitfall of this essay is, even though it's focused on law, that wouldn't stop you from bringing in data. I've given some suggestions here that there could have been statistics on the extent to which reference laws are broken, or self-harm data would have really strengthened the essay. Overall, evidence use is very important for an essay. John Jung does it well, and I believe that's also why he's won. Next up, we have language and style. Here, there's especially three things that is done very well in the essay, and that I think going forward when in your writing is something you could focus on, namely precision, clarity, and academic tone. Precision is that when you're dealing with an idea like legal paternalism or John Stuart Mill's harm principle, it's very important that you speak clearly. You don't need to write super long sentences, but you need to very clearly and precisely say what you're trying to say. If you don't do that, the markers might think you're trying to hide something, you don't really understand it, or an imprecise definition could come back and undermine your argument. This leads us to the next one, which is clarity of expression. This is something John Jung also does well, in the sense that just because a concept's complex doesn't mean it needs to be written that way. So he does this as the excerpt here: the value of a self-harming choice and thereby its legitimacy depends on two conditions, and then outlines them, which could have been written as a paragraph, but there's no need for that. Next up, we have academic tone. I believe this is something that's often misunderstood. I think some students believe it to mean that you need to use fancy words, you need to get out your dictionary. I think that's not what it's about. Academic tone is about being serious in your writing, making complex ideas accessible, which is what I've written below as well. But to make sure that the tone you're using is not casual. That does not mean that you need to use a bunch of fancy words that you don't understand, because the pitfall of that is if you do that and use a word you don't understand, and it's not an appropriate word to use, then your essay will be marked down. Academic tone simply means it's not the way you would write to your family, it's the way you write a paper. Language and style is incredibly important for making complex ideas accessible and for being persuasive, which is what John Jung does, because he very well steps the line between being academic, but also being clear and precise. His essay could have easily been a lot longer, but it is the length it is because of his clarity and precision in language.